Okay. So last time we saw the sources for the whole idea of Noten Tam Lifgam. Primarily, is that drasha about nevela Ra'ui Lager is what's forbidden, but it's not Ra'ui Lager, it's not forbidden. That's taught us Noten Tam Lifgam. We also saw some Mishnahs. Today I want to start with the Shulchan Aruch, which is a good place to start if you want to know the halacha. Seems like that. So let's open to the beginning. Shulchan Aruch Siman Kuf Gimel Sif Aleph. Joel, you're here. Okay, maybe Joel, you want to start us off?
Don't seem so surprised that I made it for sheer Rav Nachum. It's
you're a stalwart member of our class, but
the last 2 weeks I haven't been here. So all right, cool.
So often you're not here, I
think. So kol davar shetamo pagum eno oser taruvoto eno oser taruvoto ve'afilu ein tamo pagum machmat atzmo shebifnei atzmo hu mutam umeshubach elo shepogem taruvoto mutar. All right, so anything that has a pagum flavor doesn't make a mixture in which it's put. It doesn't make it asur. The thing itself being asur on its own, theoretically, if it had a good flavor, and even if it's not on its own bad tasting, shall we say, but if it on its own maybe it's very tasty, but once you put it in it doesn't mix very well, shall we say, with the tarovet, so that it gives a tarovet.
Right. So what's the case in the Gemara that we saw? What was the case of this?
Oh, it's it's yain. Not it was vinegar on greasing, wasn't it? Was it chametz and greasing?
Exactly. So vinegar is perfectly good vinegar. It falls into your grisim, into your barley, and it doesn't do any good for the barley. But it's on its own okay. So if the vinegar would be a forbidden vinegar because it's from a wine vinegar, then your tarovet would still be kosher. Okay. Yeah, read the Ramah.
Haga mihu dvarim chashuvim kibirya or kayoseba im enam pigumim beatzman alpha pisha pogmim atavshil enam betelim afilu be'elef. Right. So, but for things that are that don't have bitul because of chashuv, those categories we had in was it kuf aleph kuf bet? One of them was Dvar Shesha Matarim might also fit in this. Those things have to actually be fully pagum on their own, not just their pogem, the tarovet, in order for them to be not. Batel's not the right word here.
Right. What would be your first guess as to why? I mean, you probably have seen it, but what's the explanation for that halacha without seeing any of the commentaries?
Because it itself is not a batel thing, and therefore it itself still has the chashivut in the thing, and so you're still eating the chashuv thing itself. And so
right.
therefore it's like
right. That's good. Anybody else has another explanation? Lexi?
I mean, this is sort of like spoiling with what the commentaries will say, but I do think there's something intuitive to the notion, right? That when we say something is like eno batel afilu ba'elef, we're saying that like it's not batel because of some significance we assign to it, regardless of its flavor, right? Because our assumption is generally that most things do not give flavor within 1,000 or more parts. And if we still say it's not batel, it means that there's something going on here beyond the flavor that it imparts.
Exactly. In other words, In other words, if it's in 1,000 and it's not batel, so what do we care that it's giving a bad flavor? It's not giving a bad flavor at all, actually, because it's so small. In other words, when we have something that's usher like birria, like a bug, which is usher in 1,000, it's not because of the flavor it gives, so it doesn't really help us anything that the flavor is bad, because the source of the isser is not to do with the flavor; it's to do with a rabbinic chumrah on these things because of their chashivut. Okay, so we read the first seif. Let's just look quickly at the Shach Aleph. Keep reread Shach Aleph. Yeah.
All right, Shach Aleph. Kibirya ochayet seba, kigon chaticha realit kabed, udavar shebeminyan, uchay gavne, degufola batil be'elef, afil eno noten tam. Right. So it's kind of similar to what Lexi was saying. Right. Here's all the examples that we've seen. We haven't done davar shebeminyan yet, but still. And we've seen it peripherally. because it itself, like its body, its essence isn't batil even in 1,000, right? Even if it doesn't give flavor, and so therefore, kilkach sarich shiyu pigumim be'atzman. So therefore, it needs to itself be pagum. In other words, which I assume he's implying there removes its chashivut in a lot of ways, and so therefore it no longer has that problem. It removes it from really the realm of Isser in some ways, completely. So
I have a question, but I might be very confused. Is this also one of the reasons why we do agala before Pesach, even if they are not in Tav Lifgam, the pots?
Because of what? Because of a bug?
Because chametz could be like lo batel and
Of
and
course, it is batel before Pesach.
yeah.
it's a machloket too about whether on Pesach Taam Lifgam of chametz is mutar or asur, right? So it's between the Ramah and the Mechaber, I think. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yes. All right, but so yeah, as you're saying, because on Pesach, because what was your point exactly? Because on Pesach we do Haggalah on Pesach because only if the kli we want to use it on Pesach and it's a chametz and it's a chametz kli. So we have to do Haggalah, we have to kasher it. You're saying it's pagum anyway, because it's like any kli that's pagum, we have to do Haggalah, even though it's technically would be kosher.
Because this could only be, so the best reason is because it's b'diavad.
Oh, you're saying, I hear what you're saying. You're saying maybe we have to do Haggalah because a mashu of the pot will come out on Pesach, and that mashu is not batel, and it's even if it's pagam, it's not batel.
Exactly.
But it's pagum be'atzmo at that point, begufo at that point, right? So it's not that it's pogem the tavshil; it's that it itself is pagum, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's an interesting idea what you're saying. I didn't think about it that way.
Wait, is that relevant, Joel?
Yeah, because we just saw that, right? In the
Well, the pagum batzmo is when it's not a tam, when it's a solid
Oh,
substance.
Iman Pugim Batsman. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Well,
you
I
said-
have a question. I don't remember if this comes up in one of the commentaries on the shach, but the pagum biatzmo, right? My assumption was that this is just saying that as opposed to something like vinegar, which is like actively fine or good by itself, but can make something taste bad when mixed with it, that these have to be some amount of bad by themselves, but that might not be the same thing as, for example, the status we have for when you eat nevela, right? For when you actually are eating the substance itself. Remember that with like nevela itself, we had to be, it's nisrach, right? That it has to be like actually
No,
like
wait,
kind of
are you saying
ruined.
what if a perfectly good nevela fell into my other food? Let's say I'm making chicken food and chicken doesn't go well with lamb, and lamb fell into it, and I can't find the lamb now. It's dissolved. So, but it wasn't batel and shishim, but it ruined the flavor of my chicken soup.
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying, because we've said that, like, again, if it's one of these big chashuv categories, that it has to be something that is not fine completely by itself. But I'm saying when we're saying pagum ba'atzmo is our status that it can't just be fine by itself, right? It has to be some level of unpleasant tasting on its own, but not necessarily actually like inedible in the same way that we say for like the nevela she'eno ra'ui lager is like
But that's
inedible.
right. But that
Or
nevela
is
is
it
when
that
you
just
eat it on
has
its
to be
own.
kind of, yes, I know. So I'm saying here when we say pagum batzmo, my
But we're
assumption, I
talking
just wanted
about
to be
birria.
cleared, yeah, if we're talking about birria being batal because of Taam Lifgam, my assumption was that we're talking about it just has to be a little pagum on its own, let alone in the mixture. But I was wondering, I don't remember if others comment on it.
Oh, you're saying if pagum batzma means a lot pagum or a little pagum? That's your question?
Taz calls it sruchim, right?
Yeah, so let's look at the Chavot Dat. Let's look at the Chavot Dat. The Chavot Dat is in the back of your Shulchan Aruch. The Chavot Dat on this sieve is wait a second. Why am I not seeing that?
Is it Gimel Rav Nachum in
Yeah, it's Gimel. Oh, there I see it. Okay, Gimel. Yeah, fine. I wasn't finding it. Gimel. Pagumim ba'atzmam. So Joel, read that one for us.
Okay. Pigumim be'atzman. Avol shepigumim be'atzman afil nikakel rak kitsat batel chashivutaihu ve'in sarich sheyusad legamre. Right. So he says exactly what Lexi was saying here, right? That it doesn't need to be when we're talking about these things that are not batel, their chashivut is gone once they have some amount of pigima, shall we say? And so it doesn't need to be completely lost, completely awful, right? He's got to write.
In other words, that's enough. It's no longer chashuv. In other words, let's say forget biria. Let's think about a chaticha rui litchabed. Once it's a little bit pagum, it's no longer chaticha rui litchabed, even though it's not really masriach. It's not totally just terrible, but it's just not anymore chashuv. Okay, so therefore a little bit is enough. That might not be the same case by biria. We'll have to think about that. But go ahead.
All right. Uraya mi isur veheter shekatav nemala shnisrecha af delake probably mikomakom batel. Okay. Uvenisrecha legamre lo lake kamo shekatuv hamagi mishnah Rambam Perek Yud.
Okay, so he's making this distinction between. So here he's saying even a namala, once it's a little bit masriach, but it's kind of weird to imagine that because I would never think that a namala is tasty. But if it's a little bit masriach, then you already go to the category of it being batel, but not yet into the category of not being a biria. So you still would be loke on it from the Torah for eating it. But in a tarovet, the rabbinic prohibition of the rabbinic chumrah of saying it's not batel in a tarovet goes away once it's a little bit masriach.
Yeah. Okay. So should I keep going with it?
Yeah, a little bit more. Yeah.
Right. So that's also in Moshe Katav Hamagi Mishnah. Ilavadai de pagamuat batel chashivut biria. Right. So for sure, even if it's a little bit, the biria loses its chashivut. Ve'apri chadash cholek al magi Mishnah v'chatav de dvarim hamusim shnisruhu lokin alehem. All right. He says no. Even things that are maus, right, that we still get lashes for them.
In other words, mausim shenisruhu. In other words, when you're talking about a piece of meat, so it becomes nisrach, so it's no longer nice to eat, so you shouldn't get whipped. It's no longer a nevela. But what about something that's ma'us from its beginning, from the get-go, like an ant? Nobody wants to eat an ant or a cockroach. So if you have a davar that's ma'us, and then it becomes a spoiled cockroach, so it doesn't change anything, because you see the Torah was prohibiting you to eat it even when it was a disgusting thing. And so it just became more disgusting, doesn't change anything, says the Pri Chadash.
But he doesn't like this. He says, Ve'eno nireh.
Ve'eno nireh.
Ve'eno nireh. De'im kan, af noten tam lifgam, litzar bahu. Right? Deha noten tam lifgam, minevela, shamar.
Because what's his kasha? His kasha is then the Shulchan Aruch is wrong. Because the Shulchan Aruch says that biria, which could be like an ant, if it's nisrach on itself, then it's batel. So you see that there is a possibility of something that's ma'us becoming nisrach.
So, yeah. So, is it? I'm not sure what the who says that it's Riyal Ger. I don't remember. Oh yeah, Sheino Riyal Ger. That's what the acronym I have is. Sheino Riyal Ger. Nafka. V'kevan dehaikra lo kayat shratzim af noten tam lifgam litzar.
In other words, the pasuk about, like kind of what I was saying, the pasuk about that a piece of meat that becomes unfit to eat is now kosher is talking about pieces of meat. It's not talking about birias. It's not talking about other things like an ant or a cockroach.
Right, and then we have it explicitly in Avodah Zarah that even shratzim are mutar if they're not tam lifgam. So that's that it was a pri chadash proof is not a good proof. So it sounds like
Summarize.
Yeah, so his general, even though the Magi Mishnah seems to think not the Magi Mishnah, pri chadash is cholek on this, that he thinks both from the Gemara and its proof, coming from being Reuya Ger, that the principle is if something is chashuv and is therefore not batel, it loses chashivut with just a little bit of being pagum on its own and not being completely like disgusting. And therefore, once it has that, it does become
Batel.
batel. Yeah. So
in other words, you can have such a thing as a ma'us cockroach.
so I don't know how a cockroach goes. I mean, I hear the pre chadash a little bit here. I don't know how a cockroach goes worse, but it's, teaches on.
Now I want to look at the gra. Let's look at the gra. I'll stick with you, Joel, and then I'll give you a break.
Okay.
And it does appear as an opinion in the Gemara. It's brought up, but anyway.
So say again, Yavni?
And it does appear as an opinion in the Gemara too. It's not just the Pri Chadash. Like
Yeah, that's okay. Which gra? Probably not Aleph.
Gra.
I will point out that Andre is an expert on eating ants.
Oh, really?
True.
No, but I've seen them, how they are cooked and everything. It's just
Good reason for leaving South America. Okay, thank you.
Pagam.
No, but that's the point. There are people who eat ants.
Oh yeah.
For us, it's most. I would imagine we've been conditioned.
I mean, there's still some communities that eat locusts, right? Is that true?
Well,
We
the
eat locusts.
Teimanim are famous for that, but I don't know if they still do it.
Jewish people eat locusts.
Yeah, that's why some Jewish communities eat locusts. It's not something.
I never understood how you get a small enough knife in order to do the sheet. Whatever.
But
Sorry, Nachum. Sorry.
Here, Joel, it's gra bet.
Bet mihu. Yeah, this is the mihu in the Ramah. All right, Selomar levatel atzmotam.
So wait, what's the Ramah saying? Miu devarim chashuvim kibiria okiyotze ba im enam pegumim ba'atzmam afal pi shepogumim. In other words, they have to be a little bit like the Shach said, a little bit pagum in order to and then also, right? It's a double. You have to need two things. They need to be a little bit ma'us, and then they pogam the tavshil. They have to have both of that. If they're a little ma'us, but they help the tavshil, then they're not batel. So the Gra says what?
It says Rotzilamar levatel atzmotam, right? That in order to do bittul on themselves.
That sounds different from the Shach. Doesn't that sound different from the Shach? In other words, they have to be to the level that they're batel atzmam.
Siman kuf.
Kuf is where we talk about Birya, I think. Yeah.
Kuf is Birya. Ve'afilu pigumim be'atzman einam betelim. Kmo shekatuv sham sif dalid ayin sham. Shekatavti sif dalid ayin sham.
But wait a second. So he says, if they're pagumim batzmam, they're not batel. These biriot. Ayin sham. V'kan ayri.
Okay. V'kan ayri beviria chashuva kegon of tamesh nisrecha. All right. Kmo shekatavti katuv nevilah horiya leger. De'af imachlan b'famach
B'fnei atzmam.
Yeah, b'fnei atzmo. Patur kemo shekatav Rambam Perkei Dalet Ayin Sham. So
he's saying this birya that he's talking about is not all biryas, is only a chicken, right? Of tameh, some kind, or not of tameh, but that's not a chicken maybe, but like some bird that's not kosher, a raven, I don't know. So if only that, then if it becomes a little bit nisrach and it's pogem, then it will be batel. But if it's just pogem the tavshil and it's not at all nisrach on itself, then not. But if it would be a ant, then what's the din according to the Gra?
then it's
it seems
yeah,
to see
batel.
ain't no batel.
So.
In other words, going back to that other idea that's saying, like I was saying before, that if the Torah prohibited an ant and it's already ma'us, so they're not going to be batel in their tarovet, even if they are pagumim. So anyway, what you see here is there's a bit of a machloket going on here, right? You see that there's, to summarize, there's a machloket of whether this din of birya applies to every type of birya or only to those biryas that would otherwise be edible, would otherwise be good food, desirous food. Is that a good summary?
Insects are their own category, in other words.
Yeah, insects are their own category. Okay. So that's this din of pagum and its limitations, right? It's doesn't necessarily apply to a birya unless the birya is nisrach, and maybe only if it's a kind of birya that can be nisrach, says the Gra. Okay, let's go to bet. Alice, you want to read bet?
Okay. Bet in Shulchan Aruch. Okay.
Yeah.
Going there. Good. פגם זה אין צריך שיפגום לגמרי עד שיקץ לאוכלו, אלא אפילו פוגם קצת אין עושה את ערבתו. So this pgam doesn't need to be complete, that it's impossible to eat it. It can be only a bit and אפילו פוגם קצת, and it doesn't make it forbidden, even if it's only a bit. Right. ויש מי שאומר, דהיינו דווקא כשנתערף איסור מועט עם היתר מרובה. אבל איסור מרובה לתוך היתר מועט, ואפילו מחצה על מחצה, אין אומרים נותן טעם לפגם מותר, עד שיפגום לגמרי, שאינו ראוי למאכל אדם. So there are those who say that it's dafka if it's only a bit of isur with the majority of heter, but if it's this is majority of heter, a majority of isur into a minority of heter,
or even 50-50.
Even 50-50, right? So we don't say that noten ta'am lifgam is mutar. We say it only in a moment that it's not edible at all, like it's
What's not edible at all?
The food.
Which food?
The mutar food which receives the pgam.
Yeah. So I'll call that the tarovet.
Okay, the tarovet.
The mixture. In other words, obviously the food that came in could still be slightly good on its own, but the mixture has to be legamre. Why? So explain this, Din. Why is there this? Why is it that when it only works when you have majority heter?
So it would like be the bitul thereof, like normally you would have like that's one option. I think like you have a bitul thereof, and it would be the majority of heter, and that's what I think is the reason here.
In other words, holchin achar rov.
Right.
We define the mixture by rov, by whatever its majority is, so that the mixture becomes once it's mostly isser, then the mixture becomes defined as isser, even assuming that the isser is usser really, and the isser would be usser as long as it's not on its own pagum. Aaron, you want to say something?
Yeah, this is back to what we talked about last week, the machloka between the Rashba and the Ran about what is this. What is Noten Ta'am Lifgam all about? Is it about Hana'ah, or is it about a formalist understanding of what an Isser is?
Right. It does. It's definitely that same machloket. Yes. So here he's saying this is all put in the category of yesh, right? This is an opinion, yesh omrim, right?
Yeah, it's the Rashba, right?
Right, this is the Rashba. Yesh mi she'omer. By the way, it's a certain language. It's not yesh omrim, it's yesh mi she'omer, which is a different language, and it has a different meaning in according to some poskim. So this is the second opinion. Or we had the first opinion, and this is the first alternative. That you need to have a majority. Now, as the first opinion would say, it doesn't matter, you don't need a majority. So I wanted to say this opinion is saying like this: it goes by majority, and then once you have if it would be good flavor, then we wouldn't go by majority, we'd go by Netinat Taam, and here we don't have Netinat Taam because it's bad flavor, so we go back to our normal category of majority. All right, he has another,
ואם אין שם ממשות של איסור, אלא טעמו בלבד, אפילו איסור מרובה בהיתר מועט, מותר אם פוגם קצת. But if there is no, there's no substance, like the isur mamash, there's only taste of it. So even in a case where there would be like isur merubeh, the majority of isur, I mean the majority of isur, like the majority of ta'am, right?
Yeah, the majority of time. So can you think of a case? What would be a case like that? Can you think of a simple case?
Thinking, so it must be something which is a very strong taste. I don't know.
Well, majority, we mean
you would have like a very large pot that you're cooking something in, such that a lot of taste is coming out, but there's not actually.
Right. So, for example, let's say you're frying a pancake in a frying pan, and the pancake is thin, and it's thinner than the thickness of the base of the pot. So the base of the pot is larger than the pancake, and now we have a din that we hold that like the whole thickness of the pot is flavor, so it's all coming into this pancake, and yet it's and it should therefore normally be usher, but since it was a pot since that flavor is ruining the pancake. Now, what about a different case? What about this case? Would you say it's the same? What about this case? I have, let's say I'm cooking rice. I have let's say 4 cups of rice and 5 cups of melted fat oozes into the rice and it soaks into the rice. So now I have a pot of rice that's like very shiny and greasy, but I can't point to any piece of fat. It's sort of absorbed into it. Is that also a case of Taam? Or is that mamashut?
No, that would be mamashut. What would be your idea that would be only Taam? Because there was mamashut of the Isur. Like it was there, it just became like part of the rice at this point, but it's no longer just rice, it's rice and grease.
Okay, Joel, you want to take the other side?
No, I think I mean the tour, that seems to be tzir. What the tour talks about, the tzir, which he thinks actually counts as mamashut. I think more the case of the Taam would be I have a little bit of oil cooking in a pan and I drop a huge oil's the wrong thing. But let's pretend steak and oil taste bad. I don't know. I drop a huge steak in it and I pull the steak out, but the steak is given its Taam into the oil now. And the steak is bigger than the amount of oil that I had in the pan in the first place. Right? That would be, I think, a case of Taam ovelo mamashut. So,
well, okay,
but as I recall, there are even those opinions that like as long as there's not like, it's almost like Taam is about being liquid or like being nimuach into the thing, then it already becomes Taam by some postking's definitions, I think.
Right. I think we have seen that. I think my case is a interesting case because it's different people say different things about it. I think Gavini's right. I think we have seen that melted fat into food is considered Taam and not mamashut. In fact, that was we saw the Gemara, the definition of mamashut. Jacob.
Well, I'm thinking of how we've talked about stuff with like Gid Hanasha, where you can't invalidate the Gid Hanasha, but you can invalidate the flavor of fat that like would come from it. So it seems like fat might fall into this category of Taam, based on understanding that.
Right. Well, there we were talking about that the Gid Hanasha is like surrounded by physical fat.
Right.
And, that
this
fat
would also be
is flavor.
This would also be another
that's the flavor that we're worried about. Right. You're right. When we discussed Gid Hanasha, we talked about Taam, and we said, well, the Gid Hanasha has no Taam. We say, oh no, we're talking about the fat. So there was some.
But I think we're talking about. I don't think we were saying that the fat is the flavor. I think we were saying that the fat is also a stool and it has flavor, unlike
that.
It doesn't mean it doesn't have
ever. That's the more Meduyak way of saying. Yeah, I think you're right.
This would be a second nafkamina between the Rashba and the Ran, where potentially if Rev Nachum, you're correct that the Rashba would hold that even a significant amount of fat would just be Taam and not mamashut. If you had a significant amount of fat, even if it was just Taam, still would seem for the Ran that the added Hana'a having extra Taam, even if there's no
Because
mamashut.
remember, the bad Taam. It's bad Taam. No,
Right,
the
but the
Ran
extra,
has
sorry,
to
the
be
extra
volume.
of having extra. But if you have fat and rice, the rice is there is
Not necessarily. If you ever take like a glass of water and put into it half a cup of sugar, it doesn't overflow, even though the glass is a full glass of water. If you fill up a glass all the way to the top, you can still put in sugar. It's something to do with chemistry, I've heard. So it could, so it could be that you melt fat into a loaf of bread, and a loaf of bread is still the same size. And it could be a ton of fat you absorb into it, but it's still, the volume is not changed. So I don't know if it's enough kamina, but I was just giving an extreme example. It's not really, I was just giving you a kind of a way out example. But yeah, that might be a case too. Maybe the fat is a case, but certainly the case that Joel said, or the frying pan with the pancake, those would be cases of where you have majority Taam. It's kind of hard to imagine majority Taam, but those would be cases of majority Taam.
So just for a more practical application of that, what about food extract? Like, sometimes you have vanilla extract, or you have like.
Yeah, but it's majority Taam means a physical majority.
Right. No, but I'm saying like food extract, we majority Taam, but no mamashut really. Right. So I don't know if you ever did like.
No, majority Taam is measured in size. So if you have like a gallon of extract and it pours into another gallon of wine, and it ruins the wine, since it's 50-50, it's it's just Taam, maybe because it mixed in. Well, there's also mamashut. See, I'm trying to come up with a case of where there's,
but it's
where there's Taam, which is not mamashut.
The case that
if it's a liquid into a liquid, it might be mamashut, but a liquid into a salad might be just Taam. That's what I'm saying. So if the extract fell into your loaf of bread and it was an equal size loaf of bread, it might be mutter anyway, because it's only Taam. But we're not concerned with like how powerful the flavor is. All right, let's go on. Let's go on to Yesh Mish Chochech, and that's the Ran.
Okay. ויש מי שחוכך לומר שאם הגדיר האיסור מידתו של התר, עד שהוא משביח יותר, כשאוכלו בגודל מידתו ממה שהוא פוגם בהפסד טעמו, אסור, עד שיפסל מלאכול אדם. So there's somebody like Ran who says that if it makes bigger the amount of heter, that it's better, then therefore it's better when he eats it because he has pleasure from the fact that he has more food, and the pleasure is bigger than the begam of the isur. So in that case, it's asur because he enjoys that, right? It would be only mutar in a case where it wouldn't be edible. Shall I read on, or?
Yeah. So in other words, the Ran says that if you, this is the idea that the midah is larger, then that would also forbid. By the way, what Joel said is shach hey. In other words, that he said like a piece of meat fell into the oil and you took it out immediately. That's exactly what the shach says in hey. It says in the second line, he says, Varash, or the first line, Varashba, this is Zeloshon Rashba. Venira shafilu, he's actually just quoting the Rashba. Venira shafilu nafal letoch heter mu'at. So let's say a big piece of meat fell into your chicken soup that was smaller. Vekiro v'zorko, you recognize it and you took it out. V'harotev mutar. Why? Lefisha ein kan el tamo. You took out the piece of meat. It's just the chicken soup has the flavor of the meat. Even though the meat was larger, it's just Taam, and therefore it's, even though it's majority Isser, it's still going to be mutter because it's just Taam. That's kind of like what Joel was saying. But back to the Ran. So right, the Ran says you have to evaluate how large it is or small it is. In other words, do you benefit more from the newfound size than you lose from the bad flavor? Unless it's so bad that no person would eat it. And then he goes on b'mei devar mamurim.
במה דברים אמורים שפוגם מתחילתו ועד סופו, אבל אם השביח ולבסוף פוגם, או פוגם ולבסוף השביח, אסור. So this is only in a case where when it's pagum from the beginning to the end, but if it's initially tastes good and then it gets spoiled or vice versa, so it's asur.
Okay, let's look at the Zion here, which is Shach Zion. Keep reading here.
Okay. או פוגם או לעשות השביח אסור, פירוש אחר שהשביח, אבל קודם שהשביח מותר.
All right, stop there. Wait a second. So what is he saying? He's saying like this. If it's perush achar she'eshbiach, in other words, if it ruined it, but then it got better, now I can't eat it. But kodem to that point, in other words, if it first came in and it ruined it, and I know in an hour it's going to make it better, but I eat it before that comes about, kodem she'eshbiach mutar. Afal pi she'efshar she'yishbeach achar kach. Even though later it will become maybe a good thing, I have a window where I can still eat it. Now on that, there's a siftei dat Zion. So look there. Look at the siftei dat Zion in the Pri Megadim.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is it forbidden if at the beginning it's as ishbiach and then at the end it's pogem?
Because it had a moment of mashpiach, so then it's usher at that time, and the fact that it later gets worse. Remember, we're saying it's still edible. It hasn't become inedible, so it's just not so tasty. But it's actually all when it first came in, when the Yisr first came in, it forbid the mixture because it was mashpiach. So the mixture became a forbidden mixture. And now the only way that mixture could ever become not forbidden is if it became not ra'ui lachilat adam. And it didn't get that bad yet. In other words, it came in and it was mashbiach. So it ruined it's usher then. We have no heter. Our whole heter is based on the fact that it's ruining the food. It's not ruining the food. So,
I was wondering why the Shach didn't say the same for this case. So just wait until Basov where it's pogem.
The siftei dat talks about this.
No, Oshul pogem ubasof mashbiach asur. So he's limiting that case. He's saying that's only if it's pogem and it actually does mashbiach at the end. Then it's asur because it turns out it's mashbiach. But if I grab it before at this moments where it was still pogem and not yet mashbiach, he's only saying at that point in that window, then it's still mutar. Because it's still now, it's like we look at it as it comes to us right now. Right now, it's pogem. So who cares that if tomorrow it's going to be mashbiach? Right now, it's pogem.
Okay.
So on that, we have this siftei dat Zion, and he says, Ayin shach, v'ayin pri chadash ot chet, cholek al zeh. He doesn't agree with this. For Knesset Gedola, bahagaot Beit Yosef ot chet, hechmir gam kein. In other words, they don't agree with the shach. V'yireh l'tzaded lahakel. No, let's agree with the shach. Devadai iser Torah leke, because there's no iser Torah here. Because, well, why is there no iser Torah here? Not so clear to me. Anyone help me there? Why is there no iser Torah here? We're talking about a case where it is pogem, because right now it's pogem, so it should be a normal din of Taam Lifgam, no iser Torah. V'kenish biach l'besof pogem. Now, what about if it's in the beginning, it's mashbiach l'sof pogem, Yoreh deleka iser Torah. In other words, if you eat it after it's now pogem in the end, it's not also us. That's he's not so sure about, but that also he thinks is not iser Torah. Ela mishum dechal shem iser lo shayich latira. But because it, at the moment that it started off, it was usr, therefore we're not going to let it become mutter. Because, and here you see a term, shechal shem iser. it received the name of an Isser. And that's, we'll see that concept coming up again and again. In other words, when something becomes Asur, it remains Asur, even though now it became Pagum. But at the moment, at the first initial entry, it was Asur, we're not going to permit it. And he's saying, even though Midoraita, maybe we could. Okay.
I have a question. I didn't see this in any of the commentaries, but I was wondering if anyone did, about sometimes the Nosei Kalim will comment on when the Mechaber decides to use the language of Yesh Misha Omer, things like that, versus like explicitly naming people and like the authority or lack thereof he's giving to a particular statement. I'm interested to hear that like he gives both the Rashba and the Ran with the like Yesh Misha Omer and Yesh Misha Chochech Lomar, right? That like, to the best of my knowledge, I don't remember there being anyone who explicitly disagreed with that Rashba point, right? That like the Rashba, I think, is the first one to make that thing explicit about the ratios, but I don't remember there being anyone who's like, no, even when there's a majority of Isser, it only needs to be Pogem Katsatz. And given that I can't recall anybody else disagreeing, it feels surprising that he would phrase that as the Yesh Misha Omer, especially since he doesn't seem to be dafka siding more with the Ran because he also uses the language of Yesh Misha Chochech Lomar. So I don't.
In other words, we have a rule that says like Stam v'yesh halacha kastam, but here the halacha is not Stam v'yesh; it's Stam v'yesh Misha Omer. Maybe
it's Stam v'yesh v'yesh.
Right, it's Stam yesh v'yesh. So Rav Avadia paskins like the first yesh. And which is not the Ran, and Rav Mashash, who was the chief Sephardi rabbi of Jerusalem, he passed like the second one. But yeah, wait, Aaron, you want to say something?
Oh, the Aruch Shulchan says that he says this just not because anyone disagrees with him, but because no one else presents that opinion. So he has a sole opinion that is undisputed.
So in other words, we do paskin like that second, like the first rate yesh.
Yeah, he actually only comments on the Rashba. He does not note that you could say the same. I guess you can't really say the same thing about the Ran just because he uses the specific language of Yesh Misha Chochech. But it seems like the Aruch Shulchan paskins like the Rashba.
Right.
I guess I'm just interested if that's the idea why it says the Yeshmi as opposed to just the like quoting the Rashba, because he also sometimes does just like attribute the source. That I feel like the Yeshmi is often used to like demote the legitimacy as opposed to when it's just like a data yachid, but not a data yachid that is actually disagreed with. Sometimes they'll just say, and so's opinion was. Although I guess that happens more in the Torah than in the Shulchan Aruch, but I think it also happens here.
Well, I think I like what Aaron brought in the name of the Aruch Shulchan, and I think it's correct. I think that really he is paskening like the first yesh. Okay, but I said it's a machloket in our recent rabbis about whether it's the first or second yesh. Okay, let's go on in the Ramah. Yeah, I'll stick with you, Alish.
אגב, יש אומרים, אף על גב דה האיסור לפגם והמאכל מותר, מכל מקום הגדירה אסורה. ואם בשלובה, אחר כך, תוך מעת לעת, תפשיל שהאיסור הראשון נותן בו טעם לשבח, נאסר התפשיל השני, אם לא היה בו 60 נגד האיסור הראשון. So there are those who say that in spite of the fact that it's Isur Lifgam, that it's...
Here we have a correction in my version. Sheha Isur noten Taam Lifgam. It's not that the Isur is pagum, but that the Isur gives a bad flavor.
Okay, so the Isur gives a bad flavor, and therefore the machal is the food is mutar. So in any case, the pot is forbidden, and if then later somebody cooks...
So stop there. Why would you say, based on everything you've seen, why would the pot be usher?
Isur, right? Isur balua from what? Right? Like, yeah. Why would it be? Why? Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's just because So okay, so there is isur in it. That's one thing. There is something which is asur.
Well, he's going to explain. We just keep reading he actually explains. The Rama explains. Ve'im bishlo.
Okay. So if later, right, you cook in it within, like, let's say, shall I say within 24 hours? Let's say 24 hours, a food into which this first isur gives a pleasant taste, like something, it makes it good. So the second food which I cook in the pot is forbidden if there is not 60 against the first isur. So
that's already a reason.
It's
that's
not
the reason.
Taam leshevach, right?
What's this reason? What is this reason?
So the reason is that it gives Taam leshevach. It's not anymore Taam Lifgam.
In other words, the fact that it was giving Taam Lifgam to this mixture doesn't mean it won't give Taam Tov to some other mixture. So it's essentially like a pot that's ben yomo with good flavor in it, with potentially good flavor in it. So it's forbidden because it depends what you cook in it next. Maybe you cooked, some meat fell into your chicken soup and it ruined the flavor of your chicken soup. And now there's meat flavor in this pot. Now you cook rice in the pot. Maybe the rice is very nice with some meat flavor in it, even though there's some chicken flavor too. So therefore, we have to forbid the pot. And why would we forbid it after 24 hours?
Why would
we forbid it even if we wait 24 hours? The pot would still be forbidden because it's now it's not Taam Lifgam to everybody. So we'd have to say, so why is it forbidden after that? Why do I have to do Hagala? Why shouldn't I just? Well, I should just wait 24 hours and now it's pagum to anybody that I put in. To any food that I put in. Okay. Let's open that question to the floor.
It's atu ben yomo that we
right, atu ben yomo. It's the same gezerah atu ben yomo that we forbid all pots that are 24 hours old, because otherwise people might come to use a fresh pot. So we're not going to let people. We don't allow basically this idea of letting pots sit around in your house until they become mutter and then using them. Sorry, in any circumstance. Okay. Now he gives us a distinction. Aval.
אם נערו התבשיל הראשון בחב, ותחבו אחר כך הקו לתבשיל שני, שהוא גם כן פוגם, לא נאסרה הגדירה. But if they mix the first food with a spoon, and then immerse the spoon into the second.
So let's think of a case. You're cooking forbidden meat, and you stir it with a spoon. And now you put the spoon into your hot chocolate. You're cooking hot chocolate. So the forbidden meat flavor from the spoon is certainly pogam, the hot chocolate. Maybe that's a bad example because it's milk. But let's say it's not hot chocolate. Let's say it's parv hot chocolate.
Right.
Well, no, it'd be fine if it was like, say you're cooking pig, and then it'd be fine if it's milk.
Okay, pig, fine. Forbidden pig meat. Then it's not biser b'chalav. So, and then you stir your hot chocolate with that spoon. In other words, it's not necessary. We're not going back on the case of the noten Taam Lifgam. We're starting off with just regular pork. You're cooking it you stir with a spoon, and then you stir your hot chocolate with the same spoon. So that's the case. Im naro tavshil rishon bekaf v'tachvu tachavu achar kach hakaf l'tavshil hasheni. That's your hot chocolate. Shehu gam kein pogem lo ne'asar hakadera. So now the hot chocolate pot is not going to be forbidden.
Wait, I don't think that. I think you need a second pot of something. Like then you have soup, like you have there, because I think.
Well, let's stick to my, I understand you're saying gamkin pagum. You're asking, so what was the first one? The first one was pagum also? So what
Right,
was?
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, wait.
I
I
Well,
agree
because
with
this
you.
is what's going to be
It's
disagreed
the
with
kaf
by others.
shehu pogem. It is the kaf that is doing the pogeming of the hot
For
chocolate.
sure, the kaf is pogam,
But the hot chocolate is in a kadera.
but the hot chocolate is in a pot. You're cooking the hot chocolate over the stove, and you're stirring. Let's stick with my case for now until we prove me otherwise. But let's just stick with that. So you're stirring this hot chocolate now with this pork spoon, and it's pogamet. So now the pot of the hot chocolate is not forbidden. That's what I think he's saying.
I think the Taz thinks that the first tafshil has to also be pagum, right?
So let's look at the Taz. Taz Vav. Here, Sarah. Maybe you want to read Sarah?
Sure. Gam kim pogem. Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Is that the right place? Okay. Gam kim pogem. Lo nes rakadera. Dehuil v'hatavshil share. Dera nami share. Dehavale notin tam bar notin tam. Dehetera. Okay. So the tavshil is, if the tavshil is mutar, then the kedera must also be mutar.
Which is not really a rule, which is not really a good rule, because we just got through saying before that it was tavshil was mutar and the kedera was asur. But in this case, it's mutar because of a different reason, because of not barnat. And he's going to explain why is it not barnat.
Dehari gam kan notain hakaf tam pogem letavshil v'hatavshil lekdera v'adayin hatam pogem.
So explain to me in my example.
So in your example, so you have the spoon was in the pork, then you take that spoon and you put it in the hot chocolate, and that spoon is then pogem the hot chocolate, and then the hot chocolate is this like yucky hot chocolate with the pig in it is pogem the kedera that it's in.
Right.
So that's va'adayin hatam pogem, right? And that tam is still bad. So that's not barnat.
In other words, the pork only
gets to the pot
via two steps, chocolate. Via the spoon and the hot chocolate.
I think that we have not. I think we have not been describing the scenario. I think the pork one. I think that's not the scenario. I think looking back at the Ramat, the scenario is I have my initial mixture, which like I was making some hot chocolate, right? A little bit of pork juice fell into that and was pogame this mixture. My hot chocolate is still permitted because it was pagum. But
now I take the spoon and I stir it, and then I take it out of the pot and put it into another pot.
I stir the spoon, and then I take that and I stir another thing of hot chocolate with this spoon that now has a little bit of pork flavor in it, or whatever. The second pot, the first pot that the pork juice had fallen into, that pot is forbidden, even though the hot chocolate is permitted. But if I stir that with a spoon and then stir another thing of hot chocolate with a spoon, the second pot is permitted.
That is the straightforward way of reading it, but I'm not sure if there's a nafkamina. No,
there's a big nafkamina, because again, the idea, like, unless you think pork is pagum by itself, right? The whole like point of like whether, the spoon, any flavor that it's got.
We'll read the hare again. The hare gam kan noten hakaf tam pagum letavshil. All he cares about is that there is bad flavor coming from the spoon.
Right, but I think what Lexi is saying is that the pork flavor is not itself like bad on its own. It's only when it's in the hot chocolate that there's any kind of gum.
Right, and I think this is what we're going to get into with some of the disputes, is like some people are like, oh, the Ramah put in that unnecessary extra step, and then others are like, no, if you don't put in that extra step, there's not enough.
Right. Well, let's see it inside. I want to see it inside. Right now, my reading, I think, is possible, but but let's keep going. Maybe we'll find out that it's wrong.
Well, I think right. I mean, I guess the only V'adayin hatam. Okay, V'adayin hatam pogim. Kach chatav hatam b'darkei Moshe b'shem iser v'heter klal lamed bet. Okay, but now he's going to be not happy about this. V'tam heini dilma nakit rama kan shehakaf ne'esar.
Dilama.
Oh, sorry, dilama nakit rama kan shehakaf ne'esra tchila mi isur pogim. Dahainu mehatavshil harishon shehaya bo isur pogim.
Oh, all right. So thank you, Lexi. So here you see that he's understanding what he just said is talking about a two-step process, and he's going to dafka argue on that. I sometimes remember the end and read it in the beginning. So yes. So v'timhani dilama nakit rama kan shehakaf ne'esar techila me'isur pagum. Oh no, me'isur pagum. Why do you have to say that the
right?
pork,
so he's essentially saying
the pork was pagum.
Why can't I just have your case instead of Lexi's case? But he reads the Rama as saying
he reads the Rama exactly.
Rama as being about
like Lexi. He reads the Rama like Lexi, and he says, "Why do we have to say that the first spoon was me'atav shel harishon shaya bo iser pagum because the iser became pagum when it fell into the chocolate. Vaha afilu im haya isur gamur." That's why I was reading it. The afilu haya isur gamur, that it was just pork I was stirring and not hot chocolate. I don't need 2 jumps of hot chocolate. I could have had just the first case that I said, that it was just pork that I was stirring with the spoon. It's isur gamur, bekaf, techila, betach bo lekadera, sheyesh bo tavshil, sheoto isur bekaf hu pogmo, and that isur, that pork forbids the first forbids the hot chocolate. Havale hakadera.
It doesn't forbid the hot chocolate. I think it is pogem the hot chocolate.
No, it's pogem. Yeah, said it wrong. Yes, pogem the hot chocolate. In other words, he's saying, why did you, Rama, say that I stirred? Let's, instead of doing 2 pots of hot chocolate, let's say pork fell into my chicken soup and it ruined my chicken soup. And now I stir the chicken soup with the spoon, and now I take the spoon out and stir the hot chocolate with it. Well, why does that have to be the case? Is what the Taz is saying. And then the hot chocolate is matur. Even if the first thing that I stirred was a pot of pork, it would be the same case. That's what he's saying. He's exactly saying that in either case, it's not barnat.
Wait, but that has to be part of hot chocolate, right? Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Not with pork.
Oh, the chicken is
no. Once you've got the chicken.
The chicken, you're right. So let's not say chicken soup. Let's say pea soup. But pea soup, pork is good in pea soup. That's a bad example. Fish soup. There you go. Nobody wants pork in their fish soup. So your pork fills your fish soup. You stirred the pot, and now you take the spoon out and you stir your hot chocolate. So why does the Ramah take that case? Is what the Taz is saying. Let him just take a case where you stirred a pork pot with a spoon. I mean, the answer is, you know what the answer could be? What's the potential answer? If let's say the Ramah agrees with them, there's no difference. So what could be a potential answer? Nobody's stirring pork pots. Nobody cooks treif in their house. All that happens is sometimes a drop of treif falls into something. Nobody's like cooking non-kosher things. So that's why they take that case. But in Hachanami, it's the same difference. Why is Joel saying this is incredible?
Oh no, the chart that Yavni and Ilana made with just all these scenarios according to the different achronim. It's really nice.
Thank you, Yavni. I mean, I didn't see it, but thank you. Okay. So he says, why did the Ramah take this double case? He could have taken a single case of stirring pork.
Okay, so we said
the enoseret. Pick up from there. It's not barnat either way. The enoseret.
The enoseret masha yitbashel bo achar kach afilu im oto haisur shebekaf notein tam lishvach. Dehakaf notein tam pogem betavshil v'tahatavshil notein tam pogem l'kedera v'hakadera shetitain achar kach tam lishvach v'masha yitbashel achar kach havale notein tam bar notein tam dehetera. Okay, so the
so he's saying it's always going to be notin tam dehetera because it's, even in my case of the pork, stirring the pork spoon, stirring the hot chocolate going to the wall, it's
That's only
heteira.
right. That's
Why
already
is it
not bar nat
heteira?
for the ketera.
Why is it heteira? Why is it not isura? Isn't the pork flavor going directly into the wall from the spoon? Isn't that
Well,
pork?
the mixture is what's going in, I guess.
Yeah, but before we said that we cooked, why isn't the first pot also the heteira? The first pot that let's say a drop of pork fell into my fish soup, and now the pork flavor went into the wall of the pot and forbidden the pot. Well, why did it forbid the pot? It went in along with the fish, and it was pagum.
I think the idea is that we imagine the pork kind of contacting the pot in a way that is in some ways kind of separable from its like mixture with the fish, right? That we believe there is now like pork flavor.
But the flavor from the spoon can only go with the hot chocolate. Okay.
Yeah, I think that kind of has to be what it is, and I wonder whether that's what's behind at the beginning, the like, what was it?
Because we've seen that before. In other words, it's not bar nat.
Right, the Hatzav Shil Shari
directly
Hakadera
touches-
Nami Shari is like trying to rebut that assumption of how it works, right? It can be. Seems like that's trying to say.
I think
like,
that,
go ahead.
I think there's also there is also a debate about the difference in not bar not when you're talking about transfer from a kli and transfer from a food. So it could, as per what Lexi said about one of the differences between the kaf and the something actual food falling in, it could also just be in terms of how we think about not bar not transferring in reference to a kli.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't fully read the reasoning, right? But he says, "Kevan shemitchila ba tam shel ha'isur al yedei pgam." So, like, once that isur tam is like kind of marked in its own way, then like it doesn't seem to matter what happens to it.
You're saying what's in the spoon?
Yeah.
What's in the spoon is marked as pagum, and therefore it remains heter all the time. Okay, yeah. So basically, the Ramah doesn't, the Taz doesn't see a difference between these two cases. Let's look, before the break, let's look at this Nekudat HaKesef, Aleph. Here, Sarah, you want to read that?
Yeah, hold on, I just find it. Okay. All right, so he's commenting on V'tam Hein Delama Naki Rama V'chule. Yafe Kiven Rama. De Al Korcha Gam Kavanata Isur V'Heter Ha'aroch Kin Shehakaf Bala Mi Isur Pagum Di'im Lo Kain Leika Ela Shneit Not Netam. So he's saying no, the Rama's case, i.e., what we were calling Lexi's case, is correct, and it makes sense that he talked about that case because he thinks that you would only have two. You won't have enough steps to get to real.
You won't have enough steps. So read on.
Ve'anan kaimalan le'el siman tzadi hey delo sharei nat bar nat ela hecha dehave shlosha not netam lehetera. But in siman tzadi hey, it seems like we need 3 steps, and so if you only have 2 steps, that's not enough. Wait,
to explain, so first of all, this is the opinion of the Mar. By the way, if you listen to the lecture that Joel sent out, he talks about the Marshal, and this is the opinion of the Marshal. He talks about how the Marshal is like bringing in Ashkenazi Psak, history of Psak, which is independent of what the Mechaber is doing. And this is basically a machloket going on here. This is a very important machloket, which is whether you need 3 noten tams or 2 noten tams. And the Marshal and the Shach, well, basically the Shach says the Marshal is how we paskin, you need 3. And the Taz is probably saying you only need 2. And therefore he doesn't see.
I don't think we even need to say that the Taz says we only need 2. I think we can say the Taz says we need 2 in the case where one is Lifgam. Right? Like if we say like, if we say the Nat Barnat issue is just a question of removing it from the flavor, then that's like
you
separate.
Look at Tzadi Hey. In other words,
this is not bar not the hetera. So if it's not pagum, then it wouldn't be the hetera.
Right. Right. For sure. But wait. So why is I'm not sure. We'll have to wait till we see Tzadi Hey when Basar B'chalav. But let's keep it as in the back of our mind that certainly the Shach and the Marshal are, the Shach is whole going like the Marshal, we need 3. Why is there 3 in what we're calling Lexi's case? So the Lexi's case was, to remind myself,
Because
is
like the little bit of pork falls into the hot chocolate.
into the
and
fish
exudes
soup.
flavor
fish
into
soup,
the hot
right?
fish soup.
First we have the
Okay.
fish soup.
Into the fish. And
You gotta
exudes
keep
flavor
it
into
different.
the fish soup. And then the spoon. So that's 1. Then it goes into the spoon. That's 2.
Wait. So wait, it's
As
Taam
in, by
Lifgam
the
into the
time-
spoon. It's Taam
By
Lifgam
the
into
time
the
the
spoon.
spoon goes into the soup, there is now a bad flavored soup, right? Because the
Exactly.
pork in the fish soup is bad, right? So by the
Right.
time the spoon, there's the first like
The
Taam
first note in
Lifgam,
Taam
which
is the
hetera,
hetera.
which is from the gross now fish soup to the spoon, then
Yeah.
from the spoon to the hot chocolate, which is a second one that is also gross, and then from the hot chocolate to the pot.
But if you say it was a pork pot that he was stirring and not the fish soup, then the first Taam that went into the spoon was noten Taam. It's true. We do have 3 levels, but the first one is the Isur, is an Isur going in. We need 3 not barnats to hetera. This is Gavaldik. This is Gavaldik because this is teaching us, this is a very important din, because a lot of people, we think of not barnat the hetera of 2. And here we're saying this is actually a case, says the Shach, where we need 3 not barnats the hetera. And that's the halacha, and that's why the Ramah kiven yafeh.
But why doesn't he just say it's not the hetera, it's the isura in your case? Or is that, maybe that is what
No, he's
saying.
ignoring that. He's saying,
He's just ignoring that, but like,
I think that
if-
Taz thinks that you
if
need
that's what the
2
issue is,
not
why isn't he
barnats.
just saying that?
No, I think that Taz is holding that you need not barnat the hetera twice. And we have that in the case of the pork, where I stir the pork and then I stir the hot chocolate. We have not barnat the hetera twice. Does that answer your question? Was that your question? No,
I'm
it was,
saying, why doesn't the Nekudat Kesef,
yeah.
when he's trying to argue with the Taz, say the reason that the Ramah brings this case is, and the Ramah is correct, is not because it turns out we need 3 steps instead of 2, but because the case that the Taz wants this to be about is not Barnat Isura, and that doesn't really produce the outcome that we want.
In other words, why doesn't he say, you, Taz, agree with me that you need 3 steps, but you forgot that here you have, the first step is the Isura, not the hetera.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Because I think that the Shach thinks that the Taz holds that you need only 2.
Isn't our classic like fish and kutach scenario one of only 2, right? Because it would be meat to pot, pot to fish, and then the fish, which any remaining meat flavor would be being eaten with the dairy, right?
Wait,
and
so
if
wait,
we
wait.
say that's
This is
permitted,
something that
that's
we-
only 2.
We haven't seen this together as a group, but so the case is that you heat up fish and you put it in a hot, you put it while it's still hot into a fleshik plate, and then you take the fish again and eat it with kutach. That's what you're talking about? And in that case, you're saying that's only 2? Because, well, let's see if we could think
It's only 2
3.
to hetera. No, it's only 2 to hetera, right? Because there's the meat to the bowl or pot, depending on how you're defining that, right? And then there's that bowl or pot to the fish. Those are the 2 hetera, right? Because the meat to the
And there's
pot and
there's
the
the
pot to
meat that
fish are both
originally went into the
fine.
plate. There's the meat that originally went into the plate. That's one. And then there's the meat. Then there's the meat going from the pot into the fish. That's 2 the hetera.
Right, and then
And
if
but
we're
when the
eating
fish-
that in
when
a
the-
bowl of kutach, that's just
already the
whatever.
isura.
But it's not
Correct.
a it's
There's
not
only
a
2
Taam de
hetera.
Isura, it's a Taam de Hetera, because the
Well, no, the first 2 are hetera. By the time you get to the third one, it would be isura, right? As in there's not
the
3
Taam
separate steps.
the Taam that comes out of the fish in that case is not a Taam de Isura. It might interact with the Taam that comes out of the fish is Taam basar de Hetera. So it's still 3 steps, and it's only when it combines with the Taam of the kutach that you might think there was an issue. But the Taam itself that's coming out of the fish
I don't think
is still
that's seen as
Deah.
additional nitinat tam. I think
Yeah.
those are seen as being like those are going in your mouth at the same time. I don't think it's seen as a third step of nitinat tam because the idea is like you are eating whatever remaining meat flavor is happening at the same time in your mouth as the dairy.
Listen, you're making an excellent point. This is perhaps the argument of the Taz. I mean, you're right. How does the Shach learn that Gemara? We'll have to do that when we do Tzadi Hey, but let's try to remember our case here when we go over there. Put a note right now in your book in Tzadi Hey. Look over here, because everything, of course, connects. But I think it's a great question you're asking. I think it's a great question. When I teach that sugya, when I learn that sugya, I always say it's 2. It does seem to be 2, and I think you're right. But we'll have to see how the Shach understands that. All right, let's take a break. And we'll continue in the Shulchan Aruch. There. Okay, so I want to skip to Hey, because now we're getting into an interesting topic, which is the whole topic of Bat Yomo. Is there someone who would like to read?
Can read.
Andre? Okay, go ahead, Andre.
כל גדרה שאינה בת יומה חשיבת טעם הלפגם ואינה אוסרת. ונקראת בת יומה כל זמן שלא שעתה מעת לעת. אחר שנתבשל בה האיסור. וכיוון שעבר עליה מעת לעת, אחר שנתבשל בה האיסור, נקראת אינו בת יומה. ואם בישל בה כשאינו בת יומה, התבשיל מותח, דהווה נותן טעם לפגם. So, should I translate?
No, I'll just summarize. We're basically saying at a pot that's 24 hours old is noten tam lifgam, and therefore any food you cook in it is going to be mutar. Of course, you're not supposed to use such a pot, but if you did, then the food would be mutar. Go on.
והיא שתהיה מודחת, שלא יהיה שומן על פניה, שאם לא הדיחה, אוסר, והרי היא כחתיכת איסור, שלא נפגמה. So it has to be washed, and there shouldn't be any mamash in it, yeah? Because
Right.
we consider like still חתיכה איסור. ויש מתירין אפילו בישל בה קודם שהדיחה. There are some people that are more, we don't care. Okay, should I read the...
והרי היא כחתיכה איסור שלא נפגמה. What does it mean? V'yesh matirin afilu bishel ba kodem shehedicha. In other words, the film on the pot is not enough. In other words, you waited 24 hours. So what's going on here? The pot itself is pagum, but the film on the pot, the mamashut on the pot, is not pagum. So why would we matir that?
Well, no, I think the people who say it's like mutter are assuming that the film on the pot does become nifgam, right? And everybody else who says it's usher disagrees and thinks that the film on the pot is mamashut and doesn't become nifgam.
That's one possibility, that it does become pagam. But what about, we could also say another possibility that it doesn't become pagam, and yet still we would matter. You're right. It could be we say it becomes pagam also. But it's also possible we could argue that, what would be the argument, Jacob?
Well, maybe because like if the film on the pot would be less than the pot itself, it would be like Betel Berov.
Bashishim.
But then it wouldn't just say that automatically then though, because it just says like mutar, it just says stam, right? I think that if the idea was that it could then be batal into a smaller amount than the pot,
Yeah, so
it
look
would clarify
at
that rather than just
look at gra kaf. You there, Andre? Andre, read it.
כף. ויש מתיר וכולי. והסביר עליה שגם איתיכה, שמה זה? א', עין פי.
שעל פני.
שעל פני גם אחר.
איתיכה שעל פניו. That's on its surface. נפגם אחר מעת לעת. Like Lexi said, that the ticha, that the surface is, what's on the surface also became pagam.
ובסימן 128 22, סתם כסברה ראשונה,
Kesvara Rishona.
סברה ראשונה, וכן,
Okay, so let's go with the Gra and Lexi.
We should, film is always a problem. The problem in the film itself is just how to get it off the pot. Even in contemporary pots that we have that are so impermeable or whatever, earlier pots, it's really hard to get rid of it. So we search for ways to nullify it, because it's really almost a practical difficulty. The film is just a practical difficulty. How can we get rid of it? So we have to deny its usage. I mean, we have to deny its validity, its problem. Have to find those ways.
Yeah, we can say it's also batel. I mean, it's not clear to me if the Shulchan Aruch is passing like that. It's just saying yesh material. All right, let's go back for a second. Andre, go back to Chet in the Taz.
כחתיכת האיסור שלו נפגמה, דמה שהוא או שהיא בעין,
Or Ba'ain. I like to say Ba'ain.
בעין, אינו נפגם אפילו נשתאה כמה ימים.
So he says whatever is actually there is not pagam even for many days. So that's against the Rambam. Now there's that opinion that Yesh Omrim is the Ran and the Rambam. At least so some people say. So go ahead. Here the Taz is saying that the first opinion, which says it's not pagum after 24 hours, is because what's ba'ain is never going to be pagum. Eino nifgam afilu nishtaheh kam yamim, even if it remained around for several days. V'zeh dat, go ahead.
וזה דעת רשב"א בתור סימן 122, והיש מתירים הוא ארן, and so the Ran is the one who matires.
Right.
עלי דאפילו מה שבעין על הכלי נפגם. וענן קיימלן כסברה ראשונה.
Ken ketuv halavush, bilavush. So in other words, we're not going to paskin like that, the Yesh Omrim, but it's worth knowing, certainly. Now I want to go to Shach Tet Vav, because we said that the pot has to be cleaned, right? Now, this is the interesting question. What would you say the halach is? You have to have it clean and dry for 24 hours and then it's pagum? What if it was clean? Sorry, if it was not clean, you left it dirty for 24 hours and just before you used it, you cleaned it. Is it also pagum there? Seems like he's saying obvious. Of course it's fine. Of course it's fine, right? I'm just pointing
Last time you cooked in it is the last time that more flavor could have been transferred to the pot, right? And so whatever's in the pot has become like nifgam. And so once you wash out the filmy stuff on the top of it that has not been nifgam, whatever's in the pot will be nifgam, because the last time you could have had proper flavor transfer was when you cooked.
Right, but you could say that it's kind of like the flavor in the walls was sort of wrapped by the food. Like you have a full pot of chicken soup and you put it in your refrigerator. And now you're telling me that it sits in the refrigerator for 2 days. So the chicken, maybe the fact that the chicken soup is still good makes the flavor in the walls still good. But we're not going to say that. I'm just saying I have heard that actually I think that's what I was taught 30 years ago, that it has to be actually clean for 24 hours. And then maybe I misunderstood the teacher, but that's what I recall. It has to be clean for 24 hours. Here it's saying it has to be wait 24 hours and then you clean it is also good. But so we've already spelled that out kind of, but the Shach is going to spell it out a little better in Tet Vav. So let's look at Tet Vav.
Sorry, where? Tet Vav.
Tet Vav in the Shach.
כך כתב מה זה, תורת שם,
V'hu shetiyeh mudachat. Le'el rosh siman sadi hey, sif katan aleph, katavti. That's where I am. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't find it. The shot you said.
It's under in my version at least. It spills over to the Taz's column.
I don't find it. So.
Well, I'll read. Katavti the stam kelim shenit bashel behen ein shebehel amrinan sheheyu nikiim. In other words, this is a question like this. Let's say the guy doesn't know whether he cleaned it, but he does know that he made chicken soup in the pot. In other words, he took a pot from the shelf that was 24 hours sitting. That he knows it was 24 hours not used, but he can't remember if he cleaned it or not. So we say, "Stam kelim shenit bashu behen amrinan shayu nikiim." We assume that pots are clean, and therefore there's no film. We're not going to assume that there's a film on the pot. V'lo haya shuman davuk behen. Well, if he's there, and that would he write that it should be clean. Now, you have to have the proof is on. We're assuming lakula. Now, the proof you have to have for sure knowledge that it was not nikia, that it was not clean. Ve'ena mudachat ve'kamashmalan deshuman hadavuk. Eino noten tam lifgam achar me'et le'et va'yesh matirin svir lehu shetichat isur sha'al pnei akli ken nifgam is nifgam. They hold that the film is nifgam. Okay, Kimuvar Beit Yosef. V'dat hastur over there on that Siman Kuf Kaf Bet Kisfar Rishona became near Data Beit Yosef. Okay, so this is just repeating what we knew. Fine.
They have to get rid of the film.
You have to get rid of the film.
They have to get they have to get rid of the film one way or the other. If you have like an umdana or you have a chazaka, they use the word chazaka here.
Well,
but
right.
Chazaka that is when you clean a pot,
came,
you clean and you don't worry about the film, which is of course what I always do, and that's why I always have to. Cheryl makes me wash the pot again because. But okay, we get rid of the film.
All right, yeah. In other words, right. Obviously, it's better if there's no film. But again, if he cooked in a pot, the presumption is that the pot was clean. People don't normally cook in a pot without checking that it's clean. Okay, so now look at the finished. Go back to the Shulchan Aruch and read the Haggah.
ואם יש 60 נגד מה שדבוק עליו לכולי, פעלמה, שערי, מאחר דקדרה אינה בת יומה והחינכות. And he says, okay, but if you have what you said, that 60 neged
the film
against the film, then it's shari, and even as the pot is 24 hours old already without being used.
So we look at that. We say the pot itself, you don't have to worry about because it's Taam Lifgam. And the film, he's saying if you know you have 60, then that's also going to be mutter according to everybody. The Taz on this says, look at the Taz there, Tet Zayin. Ve'im yesh shishim, v'ken katov b'toras chatas, sham b'shem ha'isr v'heter, v'achi mashma divrei Rashba. This is the Shach Tet Zayin. He says, he's just quoting people who agree with this din. V'amechaber le'el, Rosh Siman Sadi Hey, v'amarshal, Perik Kol Basar, Sham Chalak al Zeh, v'amar, he disagreed. V'amar, de me'achar de ikka mamashut ba'ein, az hatam shebekedera she'eno ben yomo noten tam l'shvach. That's the other svara that I was saying that I was taught 30 years ago. That this is the Marshal again. Here, back to Joel's tape. The Marshal is coming to say, no, you got it all wrong, you guys. You guys are looking at the books too much. I know what they paskin in Ashkenaz, and in Ashkenaz we say that if you have a pot of chicken soup in the refrigerator, you don't get a din of noten tam lifgam on that pot just because it's been sitting there for 3 days, or even if it's left out for 3 days, because the fact that it's wrapped by the food preserves it. Hakol tam haba min hamamash mamash. It's like it's mamash. Ad kalashana. Ve'ein devarav nirin. The Shach says, "Sorry, Charlie, we're not passing like that." So maybe
the Marshal has the Taam not being a film. I mean, it's the film not being a film, but not to get rid of it. But say it's mamash. It's really mamash. Feel it. Put your finger on it. It's mamash. It's there.
Well, we're not talking about film. We're talking about what's in the walls of the metal. The film you need 60 against. And we're assuming that the pots are clean. But we're talking about what's in the walls of the pot is not going to become pagum either, says the Marshal. Because that din of it becoming pagum is when it's sitting dry and clean. But when it's dirty and full of food, it's preserved. It's kind of like it's like in a wrapper. The food is surrounding it, keeping it fresh. Even though, as Lexi points out, there's no new flavor going in. That's for sure. There's no new flavor going in because it's not hot. But the flavor that's already there is preserved by the fact that there's food around it. That's the Marshal's opinion. Not, unimportant posek. But the Shach says we don't pass like that. Let's go into Vav. Here, Yavni, why don't you read Vav? Sorry, I didn't let you read more. Andrea, I just got excited. Go ahead, Yavni.
יש מי שאומר שאם שמו פלפלין בקטרה של איסור שאינה בת יומה, הכל אסור דחורפי משווה לשבח.
Yeah, this is a very important din.
There are those who say that if you cook peppers in the pot after in a pot that was like more than a day old isur, then it is considered lishvach. It's not, even though it's not ben yomo, it's still considered lishvach, not lifgam, and then it can still be oser, because hot sauce makes everything taste good, I guess.
Exactly right. In other words, the hot sauce makes everything taste good. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. The Taam, it wakes up the flavor. The heatness wakes up the bad flavor. Now I have written here, it says here in parentheses, this is Hakrat Atzmo b'Beit Yosef. He says this is his own opinion in the Beit Yosef. I actually have written here on the side from another time I learned that it's the Agur. That the Agur says this opinion. But I don't know why I wrote that, but I suppose I knew at the time why I wrote that. Let's look at Tet.
Nachum, the Ber HaGalah says that it's from the Agur.
Thank you.
So you couldn't use soap that has a pepper flavor.
Soap? No. We're talking about flavor that's theoretically was good at one point. When it went in, it was good, and now we're just sort of doing techiyat hametim. But soap is, Oh, you're saying the pepper soap? No, but it's no. So actually, the Taz is going to get into that. What ratio? How harif does it have to be? What if it's like chili with one hot, a big pot of chili with beans and just one pepper in it? Is that called a davar harif? Because some people would call it, spicy chili. So that's the question that the Taz is going to ask in Tet. So look at that, Yavni.
דחורפי משווה לשבח. ומבואר בסימן צדי ה' סעיף ב' דווקא רובו דבר חריף בעינן, משום הכי בעינן על כל פנים בתבלין חלק גדול שהוא נרגש הרבה בקדרה.
So he's saying it needs to be rov davar harif. So if you made spicy chili, it's mostly meat and beans or whatever, imitation meat and beans. But it's not mostly spicy. So we're talking about mamish cooking like Tabasco sauce in your pot, or maybe, I don't know, onions, maybe it's not harif. I don't know exactly what is harif here. Onions, when you cook them, are sweet. Okay, that's just an important din to know that davar harif sort of is mevatel the din of Taam Lifgam.
It's not clear to me if the whole dish needs to be, or like if you like start cooking by putting your hot peppers in and then you're going to add the rest, maybe that would also be a problem.
That's an interesting question.
That's how I've always imagined it, is that you throw the peppers in first, right? And then we reawaken the Taam, or we sweeten the Taam. And so now they have absorbed a davar isur, shall we say. And now they're osrim everything else you add into it, but naturally.
Yeah, but you're making a chumrah, and it's not written here.
Fair enough.
In other words, you're saying at one moment, you're saying at the beginning of the bishul, it was mostly the harif. So you're saying, now you're asking the question, does the posek have to lachkor the incident, which is a topic we discussed a lot? In other words, do we have to, and the Ramah said, I never saw any of my rabbis do that. In that case, and I suppose in this case too, right? In that case, we learned that about whether he added water later. That's what you're kind of saying. He added water later, but right now it's coming before us, and we have a pot of chili with only 3 hot peppers in it. I don't have to ask him what was his procedure of how he cooked it. I can give him a heter. I mean, right, because it's not mostly. All right, Zion. Here, Reuven, you want to read Zion?
Sorry, I'm a bit out of it today. Someone else can
Okay.
read it, that'd be awesome.
So Aaron, go ahead.
Kedera shehi blua mibasar v'chalav, shenit bashel ba b'yachad, o b'zer charzeh, v'kodem she'avar laila achat, uchmu ba mayim, chashiva bat yomam, ad shetishhe me'et la'et, misha'a shehuchmu ba mayim. A kedera, which has absorbed basar and chalav, that were either cooked together or one after another, and before it had been unused for a whole night, water was heated in it. You have to wait now 24 hours. You have to wait now. The Bat Yoma period now begins all over again. You have to wait 24 hours from the time of heating the water.
We lost Rob now.
You're the host now, Yavni, so I think you should take over. So that's
All right, the 24-hour waiting period begins now.
In the meantime, tell us, what does the water do?
The water is. Oh, Rav Nachum is back.
Yeah, sorry,
Tell
Michael.
me anyway.
Yeah, tell him. Anyway.
The water is na'aset nevela, and so it's as if milk and meat had just been cooked all over again together. So you have to wait now 24 hours in order to use the pot, presumably to use it b'diavad.
Even though, what's the chiddush? Even though water, you might think what?
You might think water is water.
Water is nothing, right? What's it do? It's just making
No,
it
the
hotter,
chiddush,
right?
the chiddush is that 24 hours has passed since you cooked the milk and meat.
24
right,
I think
you-
24 hours is
yeah,
not
that-
passed.
Right.
And
It's-
even though it's
it's-
passed,
But the water,
24
water's not
hours
a
hasn't
goodness.
passed.
The water
It's
really does something.
It's
24 hours
before
hasn't
it's
passed since the water, but it's passed since the origin of the food.
I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah.
so.
No,
Not-
he's saying that like when 24 hours passes from the origin of the food, the chiddush is that it's still forbidden because 24 hours haven't passed since the water was cooked and the water resets the clock.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
So again, Kedera shehi belua mi basar b'chalav. So it's got basar b'chalav in it. Why does he say dafka basar b'chalav?
The question of whether the whole thing is not Seit Lavela for Shari Surim is up for debate, but there's nobody who would disagree that if you have basar and chalav mixing in water, the whole thing becomes basar b'chalav water.
Right. So it's basar b'chalav. Now you cooked in it. Now he says also b'zeach or zeh doesn't matter, but now before a day passed, you cooked water, and now it's bat yomo from the time of the water. Beseder. Okay. Now read the Ramah.
Avalim avra laila mutar.
Oh, because Rashi holds that we saw that Rashi last week that after Linat Laila, it's already called Notan Taam Lifgam. So we're not going to combine Chanan. We're not going to put a Chumrah of Chanan along with this. By the way, I just want to point out something. It's a very important point that I always try to teach and everyone is annoyed with, but like he's saying here that it's basar b'chalav and there is chanan in basar b'chalav. Even though, well, we're going to see the commentaries that are going to disagree with that. Like, in other words, here it's already became basar b'chalav. It's already became basar b'chalav, and I cooked milk and meat in my pot, and now I threw it all away, and now I waited 12 hours and I boiled water. Who says that there's chanan there? Maybe there's no chanan there. Apparently, the Mechaber holds that there's chanan there. Even though you might say, well, once it had the mifgash of being basar b'chalav, it's now like shar isurim, and there's no chanan in shar isurim. Yavni, you got something?
I didn't follow that.
I'm just saying, what is this case of basar b'chalav? The case is that you cook milk and meat together, and now you can't eat it, so you threw the milk and meat away. Now you waited 24. You were about to wait 24 hours with your pot to become notan taam lifgam, but somebody boiled water in the pot in the meantime. So now the water became chaticha nase nevela because it absorbed from the basar b'chalav. But let's take a step back. When did we say that there was chanan in basar b'chalav? We said that there's chanan because it's a heter thing and a heter thing, and they join together and become isser. But now we don't have that same thing. We have an isser thing joining with a heter thing. The isser is basar b'chalav joining with water, which is a heter. Why is that any different from shar isurim, which is like a piece of pork? It's a isser thing joining with water, which is a heter thing. Why would the Mechaber make a distinction? But my point is, without even answering that question, he is making that distinction. He's saying that there is chanan in basar b'chalav, unlike shar isurim, and that's just the way it is. Even though it's not talking about the mifgash, it's not talking about the initial interaction between the basar b'chalav, it's talking about what happens later down the road. It's still going to create chanan. Okay, let's go on. So wait, so who is reading? Aaron, read the Ramah. Avalim Laila Avar Mutar because of Rashi, right? That Laila is also going to give it notan taam. So it really is effectively pagum. So we're not going to say chanan in such a case. Now go on. No, you skip, wait. V'ken im. I'm still there.
V'ken im avra laila ben bishul basar l'chalav. Afal gav dachar huchmu hamayim miyad nami din hachi.
So what is that? Wait, what is that case?
That case is I cooked basar, waited overnight, then cooked milk, and then immediately heated the water.
But it wasn't, I didn't wait 24 hours. I waited overnight. So now it's a sense. So in other words, I didn't create basar b'chalav because that intervening night made me have taam lifgam. And so therefore, when I cooked the milk now, I didn't really get basar b'chalav. And so the water that I put up doesn't extend the time. Because I don't really have basar b'chalav actually. What about yeah.
Keep going.
Okay, go ahead.
V'hu adin b'chol ha'isurim, lefi mai dekay malan b'chol ha'isurim chaticha nase nevela, v'ayin la'el siman tzadibet, v'makom hefzed yesh la'atir b'chiyat gavna, b'sher isurim b'chol inyan, rak shehe me'ed le'et mizman bishol isur.
Oh, so here this is very interesting. Go ahead.
Right. So the v'hu adin, I think, is referring back to all of what not just specifically the immediately previous point, but the whole system here.
The whole system here, exactly. The whole system here that water extends things. So that also works with Shari Surim because we are the Ramah, we're not the Mechaber, and we hold Chanan b'Shari Surim. So therefore, if I cooked, let's say, pork, and then waited 12 hours, and then boiled water, so now I've got fresh pork going in because that 12 hours, it didn't become pagum yet, and I revitalized it. I created Chanan. And then, but the end is very interesting. The end is a very interesting point. Go ahead. Behefsed Baruba.
ובמקום הפסד, יש להתיר בחיי הגבנה בשאר איסורים בכל עניין, רק שהם מעת לעת מזמן בישול איסור. So
here he's saying that, you know what, that whole din that I hold, not like the Mechaber, if it's Hefsed Meruba, then I don't really hold it. If it's Hefsed Meruba, is definitely. Yeah, you have an interesting question. Not with a liquid. Yeah, we did see that. We saw that, but I don't know if that's relevant here. But yeah, okay. Anyway, the point I think is interesting here is that in Hefsed Meruba he's willing to backtrack and go like the Mechaber and say there's no Chanan b'Shari Sur. At least in this din. At least in this din of the water. In other words, in combination with the din, we're not going to say Chanan b'Shar Isurim when there's a Hefsed Meruba and we're talking about a case of an intermediate food prolonging the life of an Isser.
Rav Nachum, I'm just confused by the end here. Is he saying this heter is only when there's been Shahia Me'et La'et from the Bishul of the Biser, because of Bishul of the Isser, because then it would seem like the thing is not Bat Yoma anymore, and in other words, maybe not care.
Exactly. In other words, we're going to still stick with our din that if you cook pork in it, it's not batel until 24 hours since you last cooked the pork. But what about extending it to 36 hours because after 12 hours I boiled water? That we're not going to do if it's a Hefsed Meruba. But we still need to have at least our 24 hours from the original entry of the Isser into the pot. So basically, he's throwing out.
What do you do with the Avra Lila?
The Avra Lila only comes into play when there's not a Hefsed Meruba.
Only comes into play to do what? To be matir.
To be matir. If it's not a Hefsed Meruba, then we can also matir if Avra Lila. So we have.
Because Avra Lila is what?
Is it essentially Avra Lila?
Avra Lila is the original Me'et La'et.
Exactly, it's the original Me'et La'et.
Me'et La'et is really itself a chumrah, and therefore we don't want it. We don't want it when there's Hefsed Meruba.
Well, I would say like this: this whole din of the water extending everything.
We don't want the extent. We don't want Me'et La'et, which in itself is a chumrah on top of Avra Lila.
Exactly, we have a chumrah on top of a chumrah because this water is a chumrah. This intermediate cooking of causing the extending the life of the taam in the pot is a chumrah. Now we have a little time. Let's see if we can see.
You got to do something in the shach, no?
Yeah, actually, there's a whole
the bottom
Beit Yosef I wanted to see. So the shach yud chet and it.
What's up to you?
Well, we just learned the Ikar Din. Now we're just
having fun.
Okay. Now we're just having fun, and we're looking at the shach. I want to go back to the Beit Yosef. In the time we have, let's quickly go back to the Beit Yosef because I don't like the way the Taz actually like the shach. Sorry, the shach summarizes the Beit Yosef, but I don't think his summary does justice to what's written there. Whatever. I don't think it's always better to see it when you have it inside.
Okay, Beis Yosef, where do you
Beis Yosef, Zion. Here, Lexi, maybe you want to read. In Zion, it's about this topic.
Yeah, let me what's there.
Or Aaron wants to read it.
Yosef Zayin Mashkatav Rabbeinu Yom Toch Meit Leit.
Yes.
Right, from the beginning or starting from within?
Yeah, I want to read the whole thing if you can in under 2 minutes.
Cool. So Im Toch Meit Leit Chamu B'Mayim V'Chulei. Din Zeh Katvu Bal HaTruma V'Natan Tam L'Davar. Dekach Shaveh Hamayim L'Didan Kamo HaIsor Atzmo Dekol Hamayim Nasu Nevela. Kivan Shelo Haya Bahem Shishim Lebatel Plitat HaKli. V'Chazru V'Nivla'u B'Kdera. Right, is what we've been explaining, that like the water absorbs the Isser that was in the Kli, that hasn't become Nifgam yet. The water becomes all Isser, as I said, Nevela, that's reabsorbed into the Kli. It is now absorbed Isser again anew. V'smak hevi divrei bal truma v'katav achar ken diyesh harbe mekilim din zeh achar she'en baguf ha'isor ben yomo en lahachshivo keben yomo adkan. Right, so the small point that a lot of people are making on this because again the actual initial Isser is not Ben Yomo.
Rainbow Gufa Isser. That's great.
That it's
That's a
been
great
more than
summary.
24 hours since there was any actual substance to the Isser.
In other words, it's not like you cooked pork again. It's not like you boiled up the pork in the middle. You boiled up the pot with just what was balua in the pot.
There was something, but nothing.
Exactly. Go ahead.
ולי נראה להתיר מפני שכבר כתבתי בסימן צדיק ב' שדת רוב הפוסקים בעלי הוראה מסכמת לדת רבינו אפרים דלא אמרינן חתיכת זמן נעשית נבלה אלא בשר בחלב אבל לא בשאר איסורים ולפי דבריהם בגדרה בלועת איסור אפילו הוחמו במים בתוך מעץ לעץ לעצלן בה ולעולם חשבינן מעץ לעץ מעץ שבישל בה האיסור. Right, so he's like, I think we should be making here because, as I pointed out earlier, we hold like Rabbeinu Ephraim that we don't hold Hanan B'Shar Yisorim, and so
there's no Hanan here.
Right, and so he's like the logic would not apply if it's just a random Isser.
Because remember, we're talking about Isser. We're not talking about Basar B'Chalav.
Well, but now he's about to bring that in, but he's like, if it's other Isser, right? Then yeah, he's like, if it's other Isser, we don't hold Hanan B'Shar Yisorim, and so the whole concern what's happening here wouldn't apply, and so it should be fine. Made late from the initial.
But now he's going to give another one. Wait, before he's going to give another kula, another case.
Bishal basar v'achar kach chalav u'ipcha u'betoch me'etz le'etz the bishul rishon hu chumu b'mayim balatruma modeh dechashvinan me'etz le'etz bishul rishon.
In other words, we don't. If you boil water in between milk and meat, it also doesn't extend anything because the meat. You can't. We don't say Hanan by meat. We say Hanan by meat and milk. But this is you cooked meat and then you boiled water. So
right, and we talked about this before when we were doing Hanan. That like we don't actually apply Hanan to just heters to things like meat and to milk, and so that's not going to be applicable here. Even though you might have thought, oh, we revived the meat flavor, but he's like, no, that's not what's occurring. Mihu hecha shaya balua basar v'chalav shnit bashlu well there's better biachad tzarich le'avir right ad biachad ובזה אחר זה בהנראה לדברי הקוק שהוחמו במים בתוך מעץ לעץ חשיב כאילו חזר מתבשל בה האיסור ומונין מעץ לעץ משעה שהוחמו המים.
Stop. So that's our din. He says, but if you have something that was already balua from basar b'chalav, you cooked milk in the pot and then you cooked meat in the pot, or at the same time, or one after the other, then you cooked water in the pot later. So now the water does become chaticha nase nevela, and you do have to extend the clock.
Right. So that's what basically his words, including another line or two, are.
That's the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah, so I just keep saying he's like, yeah, here, everyone would agree because I call modim, right? That with basar b'chalav, chatichat manaset nevela. Aval lefi hatam.
Continue from moni me'et le'et.
Right, moni me'et le'et mishat shulchmu hamayim dahakule alma modu shamayim nasu chatichat nevela de basar b'chalav divrei hakol chatichat manaset nevela. Right, everyone agrees basar b'chalav, things are not nevela, and so this concern would apply here. אבל לפי הטעם שכתב סמק, והנמי איכא למישרי, דאף אגב דאמרינן חתיכת מנסת נבלה, היינו לעניין שאם נפלה לגדרה אחרת, צריך 60 כנגד כולה. מכל מקום, כיוון שאין שם גוף האיסור עצמו, לא חבר כולי הילה אסור הכלי להצריך למנות לו מעת לעת משעה שהוחמו במים. Right, so he points out that according to the Smock's logic of why people are makil with this deen, it actually, there would be no distinction between whether this is basar v'chalav or shari isurim, because the whole point is that like chatichat not that nevela is when you're dealing with a guf ha'isor, right, and something being made a guf ha'isor. And here he's like, that's not what you're dealing with. Like, there's no guf ha'isor left. It's like water that absorbed basar v'chalav flavor and then was like reabsorbed.
Right, but he's not going to end up there.
Correct, but that's
he is
suggesting that according to the Smock's logic, you would even think that it's fine to count mate late from the basar v'chalav things, not from when the water was warm. But nira li d'im kavar avar alav laila achat kodem shuchmu hamayim afil balum basar v'chalav in monin mate late ela misha shebashlu b'ha'isor. Right, so he adds in like the slighter kula that we saw in the Shulchan Aruch of like, if there's at least been linat laila since the last cooking, and then when he heated the water in the morning, then you can count mate late from the last cooking of this. Or
all right, let's jump to let's stop there. Let's stop there. Let's go to the Shach again. Shach basically quotes in Yud Chet in the Shach. He quotes the Beit Yosef. And if you go back smack in the middle of the Shach, it says Ad Kan Divarav. It's an abbreviation, Aleph Kaf Daled, Ad Kan Divarav. And then it says Umevuar Midivarav. And I want us to pick up from there. We just actually read the Beit Yosef. He actually just quotes the Beit Yosef. But now he's going to explain what he thinks from that.
You say right smack in the middle, where like in the narrower lines or in the wider lines?
Well, in my edition, it's the fourth. I have an old edition though, but my edition is the fourth wide line. But it's where is
okay,
it?
I see it. Muvor Midvarav. Okay, and in the shared
people
Devorah,
see
it's
it
in the
there?
first
Mivor-
wide. It's in the
yeah.
first of the second set of wide lines. Mivor Midvarav. Zim huchmu mayim toch laila achad tzarich achar kach meit leitz mechim hamayim. Right, so as in he gave the kula of like, if there's mate leitz between the last cooking of basar chalav and the water heating, then you can just do mate late from the last cooking of food. But if not, you would seemingly have to do mate late from the mayim, right? If you heated the water in it that night. וזה שכתב כאן בשולחן ערוך עד שהם אצל העץ משעה שהוחמו במים. Right, and he's like, and we see that this carries through to his psak. וכך כתב לקמן, סימן קכ"ב, סעיף ד', ודלו כמו שכתב בתורת חטאת, כלל פרק ה', על שמו, בין נשתהה גדרה לילה אחד קודם לחימום, בין שנשתהה לילה אחד אחר החימום, יש לה קל לסמוך בקהי גבנה. המאן דאמר לינת לילה פוגמת עד כאן לשונו. Right, so he points out that like it seems elsewhere we seem to have the kula work either if there was linat lila before the water was heated, then we could count mate late from the last cooking of actual food, or if it's been mate late since the water was heated, that you can say, okay, sorry, if it's been linat lila since the water was heated, you can count that as like anal ben yomo, because that is an opinion.
Let's spell out the case.
We have an opinion in the Tosfot that
let's spell out the
is.
case. Wait, let's spell out the case. The case is that you cooked meat and milk, and then if a day wait, if it was linat laila and then you cooked water, so that's not going to extend. But what if you cooked milk and meat and then you didn't wait a lila, but you heated water, and then a lila went by? Are you also going to be makel there? See what I'm saying? You cooked milk and meat, then you waited 3 hours, and then you boiled water, and then you waited another linat lila. Do we say that linat lila helps us? Is that right? You agree with that? Yeah.
Yeah, that it's like, does the linat lila kula, like when we're willing to rely on this opinion that linat lila actually is enough to make something nifgam, does that work in kind of either direction? Or yeah. Okay. And so, but then he says, Delita, Ella Sfir Leila Bet Yosef to Eno Mo'il Dina, Ella L'Inyan Shechimum Hamayim Achar Kach Lo Yasua Ben Yomo. Right? The Bet Yosef only thinks that the Linat Laila can be relied upon of the, if that happens before the Chimum Hamayim, then we don't say the Chimum Hamayim makes it Ben Yomo. Aval Im Chamamu Miyad Shnasa Ben Yomo Mechadash Tzarich Me'let Mechimum Hamayim. But if you heated the water, before there was Linat Laila, then he's like, no, then it is properly Ben Yomo again, right?
Exactly.
So and then I do have to wait.
You cooked your milk and meat, and then you heated the water. Now that water is reinvigorating it to now, and we need Linat. We need another 24 hours now from now, and Linat Laila is not going to help us. Only helped us if the Linat Laila. And then I did the Chimum Mayim. For the Fizeh.
The Fizeh, sorry, one second. Fizeh gam ma shekatav harav, v'chini mavra layla achat ben bishol basar l'chalav v'chulei. Eno mochrach l'dat beis Yosef fedok, right? The idea that if this kind of kula would apply if there had been Linat Laila between the cooking of the meat and the milk, does not seem to work in accordance with that of the Bet Yosef. Fine. Makom bikar din shesfer leila machaber v'arav dikdera shebalom basar b'chalav damrin and fanan eini modelahem. Does that dami l'shar yisurim? Right. This is what you were saying earlier. Kevan shikavar ne'asar. Right. That we only basar b'chalav is only unique when it is becoming basar b'chalav. But once it has been naset basar v'chalav, it's just another isser. There's nothing that logically.
So what does he mean? Right. That's what he's not. Any modelahem does zed dami lishar isurim kevan shikvar nesar. Once you've created basar b'chalav, it's essentially just an isser like any other isser. And the Rama and the Mechaber is wrong. He's saying the Mechaber doesn't make sense. But I have to point out that the Mechaber, it's not the only place where the Mechaber says it. He says it in several places. This is a din of the Mechaber that he and I understand it like this. This is the way I understand the Mechaber. I have to defend the Mechaber. Why is he saying this? What he's saying is like this, that it's true that the Midoraita Chanan is only when there's the Mifgash of Basar B'chalav. But the Rabbanim made a Gezerah on Basar B'chalav even after it was created, even after we created Basar B'chalav, and it's now like a Shar Yisurim, the rabbis said, no, there's still Chanan here forever. The still Chanan can go on. And the Ramah says, you know what? The rabbis included also Shar Yisurim in that Gezerah. So in other words, there's a Deraita level, which is only at the Mifgash. And then what further happens is all question, the Machlokas is how far did the rabbis create their Gezerah? Whereas the Shach is saying that according to the logic of the Mechaber, there is no Gezerah. And
where's the line about the Gezerah?
I'm saying that the din
you're saying
Bishar Isurim is a din de Rabbanan. That's why the Mechaber is lenient on it in a Chefset Meruba. And I'm saying also that the Mechaber, when he says that in this Sif, where he says that there is Chanan in Basar B'chalav, he's saying it's the Rabbanan also. It's a the Rabbanan din. Because
does he say that?
No, I'm saying that.
You're saying, because the other, I respect it, but the other way would be to say that we're not, it's still a chiddush even after the mifgash. So, still a chiddush, because it still was a dover. I understand what you're saying, but to say now that it's a drabanan, I don't know.
Well, I think even according to the Ramah, it's a Rabbanan. I think that the idea that I think that the Shach is saying that. Let's read the Shach again. I mean, the Shach, the Eni Moded Lehem, the Zed Dami L'Shar Surim, Kevan Shekvar Nesar. It's just like Shar Surim, and Shar Surim is for sure the Rabbanan.
Good. All right. Well, say that again one more time for everybody, including me. So seriously, that's the line you want to say.
That's the line I want to say. The Eni Model, I don't agree with what the Mechaber and the Ramah are saying here, that there's some kind of essential difference between Shar Isurim and basar b'chalav once they've already interacted and become an isser. Once they've already become interacted, become an isser, they're an isser from the Torah, just like any other isser from the Torah. They're no different from pork. Maybe it has isser hana'ah, but it's no different from any other isser hana'ah. And it's not going to create chanan any more than anything else. So if you hold that there is chanan and shar isurim, then fine. But if you don't hold this chanan and shar isurim, then why would basar b'chalav be any different?
Good.
Okay, so let's stop here. I think we covered some good ground here. We didn't
I have a question, Joel. You're going to review any of this stuff, or are you going to deal with it?
Of course I am. And we're also going to finish the shach, because I think the end where he thinks that this whole thing doesn't depend on Hanan at all, which is, if you were as baffled by all of this as I was, it's like, why does Hanan necessarily matter here? So it just reawakens.
We may need some chart work here. Is that...
There will be some chart work. Yavni and Alana have already started this stuff.
The Yavni stuff. Yeah, that's right.
So, but yes.
Okay.
And look at the others. And there's a Taz Yud, I think that is there a Taz Yud?
There is a good Taz Yud that I have already circled. So
okay.
And
all right,
also,
so
don't forget,
I'll leave it to your.
Don't forget
capable...
Yud Tats in the chat, please. Because he gives a big shout out to Lila.
What are you saying?
Gives a big shout. Something happens during the night.
Good
the romance of the nights. Okay.
The short shach in Yud Tet that says Dafkel Delilah, right? It's not like
Dafkel Lila, the Fisha
Lila Goreh. That's just there's something that happens overnight.
Right. No,
I don't know what that
Rashi,
is, but
why does Rashi say?
Romantic vision.
No, if you leave food out during the day, you can still eat it in the evening. But if you leave it out overnight, nobody wants to eat it. Right. The
Nachum, yes, tour de force.
Okay, thank you. Well, the class. Thank you for the class.
Thank you.
Good job. We're all awake today. Next week is who's teaching next week?
I think I am, unless someone else thinks so. Yeah. So yeah, I'll send out sources, but if you want to get started before I get them out in the next day or two, then it's in the Gemara. What is it? Samachet Amud Bet in Avodah Zarah in the middle to the Mishnah in Samachet Amud Aleph. That's the sugya.
Okay, looking forward to it, Yavni.
House.
Okay.
Everyone.
Lila Tov.